Hey everyone, I hope everybody can see and hear me, right? Right. All right. All right. Yes, got a yes. All right. Welcome to the Authentic second webinar. So in this webinar, we actually going to look into how we can develop VS Code extensions. So I hope we can actually start diving into it. All right, so extending into extensions, a productivity booster. So extensions are always cool. So yeah, extensions are always cool. It will improve our productivity to a greater level. But let's say that is a case where you don't find extension which actually cater your requirement. So in this webinar, we will learn how you can actually develop your own extension for your own use cases. All right, so let's dive into the agenda. So first of all, these are the agendas for the topic today. So first of all, we will actually start digging into what VS Code extension API is. Then we will actually create a Hello World extension. And then we will actually just dive deep into the created Hello World extension, and we will understand what each and every file does and each and every configuration means. And then we will actually explore certain VS Code extensions features, the most common features, because there are tons of features. I don't think we have enough time to cover everything. So we will cover the most common ones. And then we will actually walk through a little more practical extension than the Hello World extension, which we will initially looked in. And finally, we will publish the extension to the marketplace. And of course, we will have a Q&A at the very end of the session. So hope it is clear. So now it's time to dive into the session. Right. So intro to VS Code extensions API. So I don't think anybody needs any introduction to VS Code because it's probably the most popular text editor out there at the moment. But there are tons of great things about VS Code. But one thing that actually caught my really get me really curious about VS Code is that it's actually built keeping extensibility in mind. That means we can actually extend VS Code in all sort of areas. Like we can add a new menu, we can add a new button, we can edit the code, we can do tons of stuff with VS Code. So we can almost edit every part of VS Code. So this extensibility is what makes VS Code really cool. And all this is possible through this extensions API. All right. So before diving into extensions API directly, I would like to just give an idea about what type of extensions you can develop with VS Code extensions API. So first of all, you can actually create themes with it. Then you can actually create language extensions. When I talk about language extensions, it's a very broad category because inside language extensions, you can have tons of different sub language extension categories. For example, formatters, linters, snippet generators, autocompletes, almost everything comes under this language extension. One cool thing about language extension is for every feature, we really don't have to write code. I mean, yeah, of course, there are features which require us to write code, but there are so many features which we can actually just get it with few declarations. So in VS Code, they call declarative and imperative style of programming. I mean, yeah, of course, there are different paradigms of programming. So in VS Code Extensions API, we have support for both the type of paradigms. Like there are certain features which we can just develop with few declarations. And then we have something called workbench extensions. Workbench extensions are extensions which have the potential to edit the UI of VS Code, like adding a new button, adding a new view to the activity bar, and adding a new menu. Everything comes under this workbench extensions category. And then we have a special type of extension called WebView extensions. Our practical example will be on this WebView extensions. The best part of WebView extension is that we have VS Code extensions, right? Let's say we have something that VS Code cannot do, then we can actually develop we can actually utilize WebView. I'm not sure whether everybody is familiar with this, but VS Code is actually developed using something called Electron, which is a framework that comprises of Node.js and Chromium bundled together. So because of that, it supports cross-platform, right? Because that is through this WebView. So VS Code is also allowing us to utilize this WebView so that we can write any HTML, CSS, JavaScript and we can actually get our work done. So if we don't find something in VS Code, we can actually use this WebView extensions, WebView capability, and we can implement it into your extension. For example, let's take OAuth logging, for example. You can do it with this. And finally, we can, of course, develop debug extension for languages that you create, or for the languages that is already existing. You can actually create debugger extensions with VS Code as well. Right. Then let's dive into the extensions capabilities. So yeah, so what sort of capabilities that VS Code extensions APIs provide us? So first of all, as I mentioned before, we have different types of extensions, right? We have different types of like debugger extension, language extension, workbench extension. We have so many types of different extensions. Common capabilities are capabilities which we can utilize for any type of extension. For example, things like registering a command. As you can see in this GIF image, it's actually showing you the command palette. All these are different commands, right? You can register your own command to this command palette. And you can register context menus like right-click options, shortcuts, which is key bindings, and also configuration. I know that you guys are using different configurations. There are certain built-in configuration. There are some configuration that associate with certain extension. For example, let's take a YAML extension. So you have the flexibility to give tab size, right? All these are different configurations where users can view, right? So we can utilize these configurations in our code. So we can declare configurations. And then we have some storing capability like workspace specific and global ways to store data. And we have notification messages, which are like those messages. We can show information messages, error messages, we can show warning messages, and also we can show different types of toast or pop-ups message boxes. And like showing output, we have different things to take the input as well. Just to give you some examples, like we have quick, file picker, all these different prompts are there to get user input. And then we have progress bar and progress API as well. All these are common capabilities which we can use across all the types of extensions. And then we have certain specific certain features specific to specific type of extension. For example, when we talk about theming, we can actually change the colors of source code. We can change the colors of VS Code UI, and also we can actually, if you are familiar with material icons, we can actually change the icon set itself through extensions. So as you can see, this is how we actually do write our own themes. And then we have language extension or language features. So when we talk about language features, as I mentioned before, it's a very broad category. We can develop so many things. And also, as I mentioned earlier, we can actually do these things in declarative and imperative styles. For example, when we talk about declarative, the bracket matching, auto intention, syntax highlighting, all these things doesn't need any coding at all. We maybe for something we need some JSON, but we don't need to write even a single piece of code. Just pure declaration is enough to get those features out of the box. At the same time, we have some imperative features as well, like intelligence, go to definition, diagnosing. You might have seen these different pop-ups when you have a lint issue and so on, right? All these are actually provided capabilities of VS Code Extensions API, right? So yeah, that's that. Then, as I said before, we have workbench extensions, which actually have the potential to edit the UI of VS Code. Like as you can see here, this is called activity bar, and we can actually add our own icons here. And also we can do tons of stuff with the workbench extension as well. Right. Finally, I think debug extension related. I mean, debug extensions are special type of extensions, a bit more complicated at the same time. Comparing other extensions, other types of extension, debug extensions work slightly differently. The thing is, we have. I mean, when we talk about debugging, we need these controls, right? As you can see in the image, we have the step in, step out, that control panel. We have this variable, watch, call stack related windows, and putting breakpoints, having launch configurations, all these things. Everything, all this UI is provided by VS Code. Okay, but if you want to debug, for example, let's say Node.js application, you need a runtime or debugger, right? You might have a third-party runtime or debugger. So VS Code wants to know how to work with this debugger, through VS Code, right? VS Code by default don't know how to work with different debuggers. So for that, they have created a protocol called Debugger Adapter Protocol. Maybe I have provided the link. Maybe we can share the slide later, or you can, if you search Google about Debugger Adapter Protocol. So it's actually a protocol created by Microsoft for the purpose of these debugger extensions, and I think Eclipse also using this. So what it does is like it will actually provide you a set of standards. So you have to write an adapter class that actually implements certain functions in that protocol. That adapter class know how to interact with both VS Code as well as with the corresponding debugger. So this is how you get it done. So anyway, we will not cover debug extensions much in this webinar, but it's an interesting area as well. Right, so that's it for theoretical part. So I think so far we only have covered what sort of capabilities we can get from VS Code Extensions API. Now it's actually time for a hands-on session, right? Before the hands-on session, I just like to give some sort of an introduction to the VS Code UI so that you will have better understanding while working with this. So the leftmost part is actually called the activity bar, and this is the sidebar, editor window, and this is a panel, and the below blue line is actually the status bar. And this is a little more dissected image of it. Like as you can see here in the activity bar, each of this icon is actually called view container. Just note it down. And also like all these different tree views, these are called views actually. Okay, all these collapsible things. And this is actually a view toolbar, and this is an editor toolbar. There are tons of toolbars out there. Even this is also a toolbar where we can actually put our tools here. Right. Yep. So I think this is actually, I assume that you guys are familiar with these different UI elements, but anyway, it's fine. We can actually explain it later as well. All right, now let's dive into the hands-on task. So first, let's create a new VS Code extension. Okay. All right. So let me quickly drag this browser window, and hope the browser window is clear, right? Yep. Okay, so as you can see here, if you go to codevisualstudio.com API, then it will actually take you to the extensions API page where you will have tons of information about different things. So what we need first, we actually need to create our own boilerplate project, right? So in order to create a boilerplate project, just go here and create your first VS Code extension. Let me zoom in a bit. As you can see here, so in order to create your first extension, you need to install a couple of packages globally, or even you can use npx or npm exec. It's fine with you. So either you can actually globally install or you can use npx. So you just need to install these two packages. One is Yeoman. If you are not familiar with Yeoman, Yeoman is actually a scaffolding tool, which means it will allow you to create boilerplate projects. So it's not only restricted to VS Code. You can create Spring applications with it, and so on. It's a really there are tons of generators out there with inside Yeoman. So we actually need Yeoman here, and this generator code is actually a VS Code generate Yeoman generator. So you need to install both of these. So I have already done it. So let me dive into it. Maybe let me zoom out this a bit. Okay, let me drag my terminal. Guys, just put a thumbs up if you can see the terminal font clearly. Okay. Or do you guys want me to increase the size of it? Okay, got a thumbs up. Yes. So as you can see here, I have already installed Yeoman as well as the generator for VS Code. So when I say your code, it will actually start a right. It will actually start a wizard like thing. So as you can see, we can actually use these to create different types of extensions. For example, you can actually create IPython notebook like extensions, and you can have extension pack, which is collection of extension which can be shared across teams, and even teams. You can develop everything, but this is more of a generic webinar. So here we will actually create a common a generic extension. So either we have to choose between these two. So it's up to you guys. You can actually go with JavaScript, or you can actually go with TypeScript. Some people prefer to go with JavaScript. They don't like TypeScript, but I don't have any enmity with TypeScript, so I like to use it, and that is an extra advantage. I mean, yeah, of course, TypeScript actually provide it. It has its own benefits, right? But apart from these benefits, both VS Code as well as TypeScript both are created by Microsoft. So you have a competitive advantage that all the code snippets you can find in this documentation are in TypeScript. So if you're beginning, I would highly recommend you to go with TypeScript. And you have to give a name for it. Let me give it something like webinar extension, maybe. Why not? And name can be anything. It's fine. Even you can have a name of a existing extension. It's fine. But identifier should be very unique, because identifiers. If you are developing this to publish to marketplace, then you have to give a unique identifier to the extension. All right. So, and then you have to give a description. It's fine. For now, I just will say something like hello world. Initialize a Git repository. Yeah, fine. And bundle with Webpack. It's also up to you. If you're developing a very comprehensive, complex extension, I think you can use Webpack, or even if you are willing to use some of the other capabilities of Webpack, you can definitely go with yes. But this is a very simple level, so I will say the default option, which is no. Package manager is also up to you. I will stick to no npm. So as you can see, it has created all these different files, and now it's actually doing an npm install for me. It will take some time. Let's wait for it to finish. All right. So if I put ls, don't worry about this folder for now. Now, as you can see, the webinar extension is got created. So if I go inside webinar extension and let me open VS Code. Okay, it's open in the other window. Let me drag it to this one. All right, let me maximize it as well so that we can actually go smoother. And I will just zoom out a bit. Is this enough for you guys to see? Just put a thumbs up if you guys okay with this. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, you have different files and folders, right? I will not go through each and every file, but all these files are really important. So let's see how much of time we are spending with this. All right, as you can see here, before diving into this file folder structure, I will quickly run this. In order to run this extension, you can actually go to this debugger view. And as you can see here, already it's selected a runtime. So if you press this, let me open the terminal as well. As you can see here, some watch task is running. I will explain all these things in a bit. All right, so it's still loading. Give me a second. Yeah, exactly. Okay, fine. So as you can see here, we are writing VS Code extensions, right? So obviously, when you debug, it will actually create a new instance of VS Code. Okay, but the good thing about this is like, okay, let me show you what this hello world does. So if you search in the actual window, you will not say something like hello world, right? But if you go to this instance of VS Code, and this is how you search for commands. I mean, open the command palette and just put this caret symbol. And if you search for hello world, as you can see here, we have a new command. And when you press this, it will actually show you a notification message saying that hello world from webinar extension. Okay, right. This is a very basic one, but there is a ton of content that we need to cover here. First of all, let's go through each and every file. So first of all, this is just a metadata file, just give you some basic overview about how can you get started with the extension project. Nothing fancy here, so I will just skip this for the moment. So TypeScript configurations, as you remember, I choose TypeScript as the project, but things in Electron like Chromium or even Node doesn't understand TypeScript by default, so it needs to be compiled or transpiled. So here we are just giving some basic information about where should we look for the source file, where should we output the JavaScript file, what should be the version of JavaScript, and so on. Just basic TypeScript configuration that you can find in everything. And then this README file, this is extremely important. Why? Because this is the content which will be shown in your extensions page. For example, let me go, this is actually the extensions tab. Let me go and select one extension, maybe this one. Let me close this for a moment. As you can see here, all this content is actually coming from the README. So make sure that you have a good README about your extension, because that will be displayed here as well as in the marketplace also, right? So that's an important file, README. Right, and then package.json. This is one of the most extremely important file when we talk about VS Code extensions, because usually in other extensions, like whether let's take Chrome extensions or PWAs, usually you will have some sort of a manifest.json file, right, in order to have the metadata about the app or the extension. But here we don't have a separate manifest.json, but all this manifest file, manifest information will be there in this package.json itself. So this package.json will contain the usual scripts, dev dependencies, everything, and also the manifest. And also, if you remember, I said something like declarative syntax, right? Declarative programming. So these declarations should also happen inside this package.json. All right. So, all right. Let me quickly touch upon the important ones. As you can see, even though it says name, this is actually the ID that we given when starting the wizard. And this display name is actually the name of our extension. This should be very unique, this name. And then description, version, it's fine. This engine is actually kind of important, but this is something that even I'm also not 100% sure, because I couldn't find a good source for this. The thing is, it's something like that Android target version. But the thing is, it doesn't mean that older VS Code will not support this extension. Even though, let's say, you are using 1.57 or 56, it doesn't mean that this extension will not support. But in 1.59, they might have introduced some new features which the old VS Code might not understand. So that's how this engine works. Categories is actually for marketplace. Like if you are developing something to do with programming language related extension, then you can give those information like what category of extension you are developing. This is actually just to show it in some sort of a filtration in the marketplace, actual marketplace, VS Code extension marketplace. Activation event. Before coming to this, I will jump into this contributes. This contributes is actually kind of the one of the most main source of information for VS Code. So all the declaration will happen inside this contribution points. Here you saw a command, right? That command, if you see here, this is hello world. If you remember, the command palette also shown the hello world, right? So all these commands will actually be shown. So all these commands are declared from this. So the command palette will actually take this information from this point. Okay. So this here it only has commands, but if you go to their documentation to references, and there is a section called contribution points. Okay. So if you go there, you can find tons of different configurations like menus, debuggers, everything is created inside here. Okay. So we will see some of those. So as you can see here, what we have done is we have declared the command. Okay. And then we have something called this main file. So this is like the, okay, let me come to this activation event first. Okay. Activation event is something like when you should run this specific commands. Okay. So it's a way to lazy load as well, because let's just imagine you have an extension and you have a command inside the extension, right? So let's say you have installed thousands of extension, and that could have like more commands, right? So if you want to load everything when VS Code start, it will never start VS Code, right? Therefore, it's a way to lazy load. Like until you press this on command, I mean, until you go to command palette and type hello world, this will not execute. Okay. So this is what this activation event means. Like when it's kind of like a when you should run this extension. Okay. So we have declared the command here, and here we are giving information about when we should actually activate this extensions command. And when this get fires, if you in Java, we always need that main function, right? Likewise, this extension needs something called an activate function. Okay, so when this activation event triggered, it actually this main will say, okay, what is the file that you want to look? Okay, so okay, here it has this output directory because I have already run the extension. That's why it's actually created. But by default, you will not see this out directory. This will only get created after TypeScript compile the TypeScript and converted to JavaScript. Okay, by default you will have this. So if you go to the source file, you will have something called a extension.js, but this is the file that will be transpiled and put it inside output.js. Okay, so let's look into this extension.js. There are tons of comments, so I will remove every comment. Even the console log is not important. That's what showing here. If you see, right. All right. As you can see here, it has this activate function. So when VS Code actually found a trigger, then it will look for this file, okay, ideally the compiled version of this file, and look for this activate function. As you can see here, in this activation function, we have some, one more thing is like this is actually VS Code API. Even if you go to this reference section, you have a place called VS Code API. You can find all the different namespaces, events, functions, everything there. Okay, so we are importing that, and inside commands namespace, inside VS Code commands namespace, you have a command called register. Okay, but if you remember here, you have just declared. When declaring, it will show it in the command palette, but it will not know what to execute when the user click on that. So for that, you have to register the command as well. So what would happen is when you click on that command palette command, it will come here, check for the activation event. Okay, it's a non-event, and it will look for this file. And inside this file, it will look for this activate function. And it will come here, and then it will register the specific command. And then as you can see here, it has a callback, right? It has a handler. So it will execute whatever it found here. So here what we are using is we are using VS Code extension API again, and the Windows namespace. There is a function called show information message, and they are just showing that message. That's the message that you saw at the bottom, right? So it's just a simple extension, but see the details it has. So it may look complicated initially, but it's just a small thing. Like it will repeat in other places. Right. So once we register, as you can see here, we are actually storing whatever returned from this function to something called a variable called disposable. So disposable, all these disposable objects, as you can see here, we are pushing those disposable objects to subscription. This is important because let's say when we are closing the extension, it's like a lifecycle hook. Like when we starting it called activate, when it closing, it will call the deactivate. So whatever the commands registered inside this subscription, whatever the disposable object that can be found inside this subscription will be cleared when deactivating. So that's why it's important for you to actually push all the registered command to this subscription array. Okay, right, that's how it works. Okay, just to give you a quick summary, from this lines, it will register the command to the command palette. From this line, it knows when to activate this. From this line, it knows when it is activated, where to look. Okay, so so when they press the on command, okay, from the command palette, it will look for this file and look for the activate method, and it will run the code in activate method. From here, it will register, and also it knows what to execute when this is executed. Okay, yeah, that's the old story about this hello world extension, right? And the next thing is, all right. So, right. So apart from this, if you go to the packages and everything else is just normal. We have a bunch of scripts like for compilation and for watch as well. So we have even we have tests, and as you can see here, we have Mocha in order to run the test. And good thing is they don't have a assertion library like Chai. They are using if you go to this source test folder, they are using Node.js own asset library, asset package. Yeah. Right. So that's all about source, and yeah, there's ESLint. Of course, they don't follow a style guide, but they still use ESLint. All the other files are just normal files, bunch of ignores and all. Okay, I just like to take a couple of minutes to explain this as well. So if you remember, when I press this debug icon, somehow it has actually opened this, right? What is happening behind the scenes? So all the things responsible for loading that extension is actually stays here. Okay, first of all, this extension JSON file is something very common. So it says like, okay, in this project we are recommending you to actually install this extension. I mean, if you go here And if you search for recommended, it will actually show you the extension that is mentioned here. Like it can be used for your projects as well. It's fine. Okay, that's what it does. But the most important file is not the settings. Task and launch are the most important ones. Launch JSON, we call it launch configuration. For any debugger, we need a launch configuration. If we don't have a launch configuration, VS Code doesn't know how to launch this debugger. Okay, so here, as you remember, we actually use run extension, right? Which is this one. This command is what we are using, and extension host is actually VS Code specific debugger. Okay, and it has some basic information about where is the files and folders you should look in and all. But the important thing is you can from these lines, VS Code will actually load the files to a new VS Code instance. But here there is a pre-launch task. As you can see, the command is default build task. And if you remember, we are a task JSON, right? So what this task JSON does is it's also a common file for VS Code. So if you guys are familiar with Grunt, Gulp like task managers or npm scripts, you can write any task performing script here. Okay, as you can see here, it's actually the build task and it's the default build task. So before launching this, it will actually perform this specific task. So what it says to run npm watch. So what is npm watch? If you go to the package JSON, it's actually a compilation step. So that's what you actually saw earlier, right? Here, this watch script. So this is how the debugging process happens. Like it go for the launch JSON, knows okay, there's a task for building. It goes here, run the watch, and then launch. So that's the Hello World program. Though it says Hello World, it's a bit more complicated. Right. So yeah, we have actually done our first task. The rest of the task can be quickly going through. So yeah, and if you are, I would highly recommend you to watch the webinar because I don't think we will have enough time to do hands-on parallelly. But if you scan this QR code, you will be taken into a repository, and you can get some code, which is actually used in this webinar. Okay. All right, so this is the hands-on task. So we have already generated a extension, which is good. So now let's see, even though we actually created a command as well, not really created, but we actually saw how to create a command, like what declaration we need to do and all. Okay, so for this, let me close this window. Let me go to my terminal. Let me exit out of this extension. Let me go inside Authentic Webinar 2. Okay, here you have a couple of folders. For this task, we only need sample. All right. So here, we actually move to the next section because we have already gone through the Hello World program. Now it's time to experiment with some of the most common capabilities VS Code offers. Okay, let me run this as well. So it will be much easier for us to have a look. Right. Let me move it to a different desktop and even this one too. Okay, right. So let's see the package JSON and parallelly see what it outputs. Okay, so this is just the normal JSON. You guys already know about all these different things, I assume. So, right. So first of all, as you can see here, apart from commands, we have configurations, we have menus, we have views, view containers, key bindings, so many things, right? Let's see what these things do. And if you remember the command section, unlike last time, we now have 3 commands. But the difference is, some of the commands actually have some more fields, if you clearly see here, right? I will go through it. And also, each and every field here has number of different configurations. So if you want to know, VS Code actually provide a great autocomplete mechanism. So they have good autocomplete. So if you just put start the configuration, it will actually show you the missing configuration that you can have here. Okay, but yeah, right. All right. So as you can see here, You guys already familiar with this command and title. Command is actually a unique ID for the command, and title is actually the display name. If you remember the hello world. So here I have the same hello world, and also I have a hello name, which is just another. I guess it will show a warning message, and then another command, which actually I will come to this command in a short bit. Let's focus on these two commands. So these are nothing fancy. Let me quickly go here. Let me open the command palette. And if I type hello world, it will actually show you a hello world in notification. And if I type hello name, it will show you a warning message. Okay, right. So as you can see here, we got couple of let's focus on this category first. If you remember last time, when you search through this command palette, it just showed the hello name, right? It didn't show this what we call this label. So this category is a way to group, and also it will be displayed in the command palette as well. All right, and then we have an icon, but I will come to this icon in a short bit, because I have declared a icon for hello world, but still if you search for hello world, it will not show a icon, right? So yeah, because there is a command can be put everywhere, anywhere. You can put it inside this toolbar, you can put it inside this toolbar, you can put it here in many places, but it will only show, yeah, it will only show in certain places. Even if you have an icon, even if you have an icon option, still it will not show in the command palette, because VS Code doesn't support that. Okay, right. So it's also the same, nothing fancy. So that is just the basic command. Okay, right. Then let's focus on creating configurations. I have already created the configurations. So what is a configuration? If you go here and open settings, I know all of you might have done this, right? You have bunch of, there can be extension specific configurations or built-in configurations. You have definitely used this, I assume, right? And also configurations are user inputs that they can give for our extensions. Okay, we can utilize this configuration in our code as well later. So if I search for dry run, okay, as you can see here, it is showing few configurations, but if you search the same here, it won't, because this is not the extension running place, right? And also if you remember this title is actually showing here as an extension, and properties, each and every property will be listed here. Okay, the first one is actually a very basic configuration saying name, which is this one. It has a default value saying authentic dev, but I have just updated it. That's why it's showing like this. But by default, it will say authentic dev, and the description, enter the name of your owner, will be shown here. And this means, and max length, it's kind of like the HTML inputs. So if you put less, it will show something like this. Everything done out of the box. Okay, so that's the basic configuration. Okay, so right, the next thing, the only difference here is the type of the configuration. So if it is a string, it will show you a input box. If it is a boolean, it will show you a checkbox. As you can see here, it's a checkbox. Okay, and also we can have objects. But if you see here, you have education, but you don't have a control to insert, right? Because if it is a type object or an array, it will not allow you to enter it through the UI. So you have to click on this setting. I mean, all the settings can also be written in this settings JSON, right? So if you click on this settings JSON, it will actually take you to giving. I mean, that's how you give input to this field. You can't you can't give any input through the UI itself. Okay, that's for object and array types. And then we have enums. When we have enums, it will actually show you a drop down. If you see here, Java, JS, Go, PHP, and enum description will be shown at the bottom. Right. All right. So these are different types. Okay, object, boolean, string, and enum. And at the very end, I have a special extension, special configuration called color decorators. But if you go here, it will not show, because as you can see here, I have an option called deprecation message. That means this specific configuration is deprecated. So VS Code by default will not show. I think up to 1.57 it will show in a red box here. It's deprecated, saying it's deprecated, but from 1.58 it's not showing anything here. Okay, so if you want to find, you have to go here and you have to just type that command. So it's dry run and color decorators, and if you just put a if you try to put a value, it will actually show you in a yellow squiggly line saying that it's deprecated. This message is actually given there. Okay, so these are different variations that you can have with configurations. Hope that is clear. And then an interesting thing is executing other commands. So when I talk about executing other commands, yeah. So when I talk about executing other commands, I skipped one command earlier, right? This particular command. So if you go here, let me open a normal file. Let's open a JavaScript file. Okay. Let me call here. So what execute command does is, if you go inside source extension JS, and if you come down to toggle commands, which is actually the, if you can see here, it's actually the name of the command. And if you go here, and you can see it's actually matched here. So as you can see here, it actually these are registered commands, right? These two. Of course, this is also registered, but in the commands namespace, it also have a function called execute command. What execute command does is, you can actually utilize some built-in as well as some other extensions commands. For example, everybody knows when I press command or control and / it will toggle inline comment, right? So that is not something that I built, but it's something that is already built in to VS Code. Okay, so what I can do is, I can actually execute that command inside my command. So as you can see, this is actually the identifier, like dry run toggle command for our one. This is actually the command ID for that specific command. Okay, so how can you find these names? That's the next thing. So let me show you the demo of this first. So if I put toggle comment, as you can see, it will toggle. Okay. See, it's actually it's not something that I implemented, but I'm actually utilizing something already existing. So if you want to work with, if you want to execute built-in or other extensions commands in your command, what you have to do is, first of all, you have to call this execute command, but you have to identify this name. How can you identify this name? For that, you have to go to let me open key maps. Not this one. Keyboard shortcuts. Just go to keyboard shortcuts. It will actually show you all these different commands and associated keyboard shortcuts. And also this when is actually important, like when there are certain extensions which will only fire when a specific type of file is open, when editor is selected, when something is highlighted. Likewise, there are tons of when statement. Even you can find this different when statement in the documentation as well. Yeah, what I want to do, I want to toggle comment, right? If I search for it, this is block, this is line comment. So if you right click and copy the command ID, and if you paste it here, as you can see, it will actually show you the command ID. So this is how you can execute an existing command in your extension. Hope that is clear. Right, so then comes the best part, which is creating menus. Right, as you can see here, let me show you the documentation as well. If I go to the contribution points, menus, as you can see here, there are a bunch of places. There are tons of menus in VS Code. You can actually place your command in any of these places. Okay, so first of all, I have chosen only 5 of those. So editor context, what is editor context? This is an editor, right? Context is the right click context menu. As you can see here, I have declared my hello world and hello name both in this editor context. That means when I right click on this, I have to see. Let's try. If I go to this JS file and right click, as you can see, I have a hello name and hello world. Okay, if I click on this hello world, it will actually show you the hello world commands notification, and if I press hello name, it will show the corresponding one. So, but if you see here, it's so random, right? One is at the bottom, one is at the top, because by default it will put your commands at the bottom. Okay, there are different separators here. I mean, this is kind of like a precedence way. Like if you go here and search down, as you can see, there are a number of levels. Navigation is the topmost level. So that's why here in the allow name, I have put the group as navigation. That means it has the highest priority. That's why it's showing at the very top, and this is at the very bottom. Okay, that's one thing to note. Right. So the next thing is Explorer context. So if you are not familiar with Explorer, as you can see here, these are the explorers. So I mean, if I right click anywhere here, as you can see, I have this hello world command. So if you put your command inside Explorer context, that means it's visible, it's accessible here. Okay, and then edit a title. When something comes with title, that means it's actually the toolbar. Okay, so here it says edit a title, right? Edit a title, right? So this is actually the editor's toolbar. Okay, so if I open this, but I couldn't see this hello world, right? Why? Because of the when condition. As you can see here, I have given a when condition saying that the language should be marked down, but here it's a JavaScript file. So let me, that's why when I search here, it's not showing that hello world here. Okay, but if I, let me open a markdown file, maybe this one. And if I open this now, okay, let me change to theme. I'm not sure whether it's visible. As you can see here, there's a rocket icon saying hello world. And if I press this, it will show the hello world. Okay, like, I mean, the icon is actually dark. That's why. I mean, if you remember earlier, we had this logo for this command. This is where it kicks in. Like, this is where it is utilized. Okay. So there are some places which some configuration work. Right. So as you can see, the key point is like in this previous thing, the key point is it only works with markdown files. So you might have developed some extension specific to a language or something. So in that case, you can actually utilize these things in order to control your accessibility. I mean, accessible nature. Then you have view title, which means here, right? If you search here, as you can see, hello world. When it comes to title, it means toolbars. This toolbar, or even the terminal toolbar, something. Okay. So yeah, I just give you just 5 examples, but there are tons of other examples as well, which you can actually utilize. All right, and then we have key bindings. Key bindings mean shortcuts. It's pretty straightforward. This means Shift Command D would actually, fire this hello world command. So let me open the screencast mode. And as you can see, Shift Command and D would actually throw you this hello world extension. Okay. All right. Right. So final thing is related to view containers, because we have so far discussed everything, but we haven't touched this activity bar as of now. So if you want to put your extension in activity bar, but if you are using Docker, Git lines or something, you could see some icons here, right? So this is actually controlled by view container. When we say view container, that means these icons, views, all these different collapsible, this outline, timeline, all these are views. Okay, view container, and this is view. Okay, so what we are doing here is, first of all, we are actually defining a view container, saying it as activity bar. So as you can, if you just hover over it, it's just an ID for that. And as you can see, the title is Package Explorer. So if you hover over it, it will say Package Explorer. If you click on it, it has a couple of views. One is dependency and the other one is outline. How where this information comes in? This information actually comes under here in the views. As you can see here, for the Package Explorer, I'm giving these 2 views. Okay, so here you can either load a tree view. There is something called tree view. I mean, as you can see here, all these are tree views, right? Tree like structure, right? So all these tree views, or even the web view, can be loaded inside here. Right. So I think we have covered all the hands-on tasks. So, right. just hang on for 5 to 10 minutes, so we can actually look into a more practical extension faster. Let me close this. Again, I will go to the terminal. Okay, again I have to go to inside Authentic Webinar. Let me open this code map. I hope it's visible. As you can see here, it's nothing fancy. It's much more simple as well. I have only a couple of commands. Let me show you a quick demo of this. So this is more like a Postman-like extension. Okay, so let me run this. It's watching, loading. Yeah, let's have a quick demo of this extension so it will be much easier to understand. All right, so what I need to do is, by the way, this is a web view extension. So the loaded content is actually a web view. Okay, so let me search for Codeman. And as you can see here, I got two commands. One is chat Codeman, other one is start Codeman. So I will just run this start Codeman first. Okay. So when I run this, as you can see here, I have some sort of a UI. There is nothing fancy here, just a normal single HTML file which is rendered here. Not as cool as Postman, but nevertheless, we'll do our job. Okay, let me quickly show you a basic example. Like, let me try to run this. Okay, let me send it. There you see, you get the output. Let me make a post request as well to this. I think this can be used. Hope the same endpoint. Let me switch the thing to post. Let me send it. Yeah, it has created, and also there, as you can see, it's 201, so created. And also, the main walkthrough of this, what I want to walk through here is not the code that I use to implement this. It's very, very simple. What I'm doing is just using Bootstrap to create this layout. And when I press this send, it will take this method and this URL along with this body and use Axios to make the request and get the response and rendering it. Nothing fancy, just few hours of work. So, but the main thing that we want to find here is this very small, simple thing. So when I press this, as you can see, bottom, it's actually showing a notification message, right? This is an important concept when we are working with web view extensions. Just note down this, and then let's use the other command. I think it's called chat Codeman. So when I press this, it actually asking for a message from me through a prompt. I will say hi webinar, and if I enter, as you can see, it will show it in the bottom. Okay, but out of this entire project, these two are the most crucial ones. And also this logo. This logo is not just to say that okay, Authentic is doing the webinar. This has a really good meaning here. Okay, right. So the thing is, if I want to just give a brief introduction, a brief overview about why it is so important, because the thing is, web view is actually running in a different context than our extension. Okay, extension is running in one process. You can think of it like process. Extension is running in one process, and this web view is running on a completely another process. So how can we have communication between these two? As you can see, this message box, it's not part of web view. This is actually part of extensions API. Okay, that prompt is a part of extensions API. But when the web view received its content, it's actually loaded this notification message, right? How our extension knows that okay, this web view got the response back. Okay, and at the same time that when on the other hand in the chat, that prompt is from extension. So our extension is sending that information to this web view. So that is a crucial part here. Okay, so let me quickly go through the code. So nothing fancy, just a couple of commands, and let me open this extensions JS file. And as you can see, we have activate and we have both the commands. I will come to this chat in a short bit, but I will just straight away jump into this start command. So as you can see here, so we have to create a web view, right? So there are tons of, I mean, if you want to create a tree view or if you want to create a notebook or anything, you can find a function there. Okay, so here create web view panel will actually create a web view for you. Okay, this is actually kind of an identifier for your web view, and this is actually the title of your web view, and this is actually the column means like you can actually drag and create a new column, right? So here the column means that in which column it should load, and here there is an object. The thing is, I want to say one more thing as well related to WebView. So WebView is extremely functional because it actually gives us the flexibility to write any JavaScript code, right? But at the same time, how cool it is, it at the same time, it actually, we are actually in what we are doing. We are loading a browser inside Chrome, right? So it, by default, we introduce some vulnerabilities as well. So we have to be careful with our code. And also by default, VS Code will restrict scripts, running scripts inside WebView. So if we want to use JavaScript, we manually have to, give it something like this. We have to manually actually want it to make enable. I mean, we manually want to enable script. Okay, so it will just create a web view with JavaScript enabled. Okay, then let me come to this logo related thing. Its logo is a static content, but usually when but the thing is we can't load different protocols. Like, I mean, we can't load a file from file protocol. I mean, just giving the relative path or the absolute path to WebView will not work because VS Code actually expects the static files to be in a specific URI format. Something, it will look something like VS Code, something like this. It will look something like this. So it will expect us to give the whatever the static files in that sort of a manner. So what we have to do is there are certain functions which will actually take the file and then we will actually convert it to a WebView specific URI. Okay, so once we converted it into that specific URL format, then we can actually pass that URL format into our HTML. That, I mean, all these are just HTML, right? Inside that HTML. And if you are familiar with DOM, we have in HTML, right? In HTML, we can write HTML. Likewise, here also, we can actually write any HTML. I mean, here we can write directly, we can write HTML. It would work fine. But here I have given us use a separate function to load the HTML. It's just normal, pure HTML, nothing fancy. And like in HTML, we have this HTML option, which will allow us to load the content. So let me quickly walk you through this HTML. It's nothing but just loading few bootstrap and JSON views, some internal styles, the topmost form, this form is here, and then the request container, which is these three tabs, and then we have a response container, which is the below two tabs. Okay, you can go through this code later as well. And also, as you can see here, I have constructed the URI for image right here, and I'm passing it as an argument. That argument comes here, and that is what is loaded here. And I have a empty div. This is what is showing this chat message, which actually will get content later. Okay, just normal scripts, nothing fancy. I don't really think need any explanation. Okay, now let me come to these two message passing ways. Let me first take. Okay, let me first take this. Let me first take the chat application, the chat one. So when we talk about this chat application, so we have a prompt from extensions API. We are sending a message to the what we call web view, right? So I mean, if you are familiar with web workers or worker threads, it's actually working the same way. So what if you see this particular chat message? If you check this chat message command, you can see there is a prompt that will take the message, and as you can see, I have given declared this panel as a global variable when creating it, so I can access. I have a reference to this panel in my entire code. So I'm using this web view and post message function uh, in order to actually post the message. I mean, this is how this post message is what extension API uses to pass the message to web view. So it has posted the message, but how web view will receive it? It's actually using JavaScript's own message event listener. If you see here, this piece of code. So it is just JavaScript. Nothing. I mean, this messages event is just JavaScript event. Nothing specific to VS Code. Okay. It actually uses this. It actually listens for this on message event, and whenever it posted, this will catch, and then it's actually doing an in HTML to that chat message div that I shown you. That's how it's rendering. Okay, so one part is that. The other part is like the other notification message. So after getting the content and loading it here, it actually popped up a notification message, right? So last time it's fine because we have a reference to panel in the extensions API. We have a reference to panel. We actually use that to send message. But here WebView doesn't have a, because WebView is not the one which started the process, right? So WebView doesn't have any reference to extension, right? So how can it send? Yeah, it actually same. We can't really say it doesn't have any reference. It has just one reference. There is a function called acquire VS Code API. Okay, this will actually load once. So whenever the web view gets loaded, you can actually call this method once. So acquire VS Code API, what this does is it will give a instance of the execution context of extension. Okay, so you have to store it to a variable, and so here inside Axios, after getting the response, as you can see here, I'm using this. If you clearly see this code, I'm using this instance to post a message, which is done with fetching. This is the message that is displayed in the extension, right? So this is how I post. I mean that, but one object. That through that one object, I'm actually using the post message to post a message to extension bank. Okay, so here if you come down to the very bottom, you have this receive message thing, which will actually capture the message sent through web view, and it will just use show information message and showing showing the notification message that I sent. Okay, all right, so yeah, that's pretty much it about this extension. So I know we covered a lot. Hope you can actually have a look at this code later as well. So just one final thing I like to do is publishing it, because we have developed a what we call a really cool like extension, right? So let me just quickly publish it to the marketplace so that you guys can also utilize this. Uh, yeah, so let's dive into that. So the final topic for the day is actually publishing it to the marketplace. So in order to publish, I mean, you can find instruction for each and everything in this documentation. The only source of information, I mean, their documentation, you can consider it as a more really cool source of information. It got everything covered. Okay, so in order to publish this extension, first of all, what you have to do is you have to go and create a VS Code marketplace account. Okay, when you create a marketplace account, this all this extension, the build pipeline, everything is managed through Azure DevOps by default from Microsoft. So when you create this marketplace account, it will also create a Azure DevOps account with a default organization. I mean, in order to create an account, what you can, I mean, just go here, just say login, and you will actually find a way to create a marketplace account. Okay, just go here. I have already created one, but if you want to, I mean, you have to be a publisher in order to publish the extension, right? So if you click on this create publisher, you have to give a unique name and ID. If you want, you can give the different details here and just create a use out of it. That's it. So I have already created a user called as Charles Authentic, so I will use it. And also, if you come to Azure DevOps, you can create a new organization, but I will just stick with my default created one. Okay, right. So let me quickly show you this part. Publishing extension. So in order to publish extension, VS Code actually have a specific command line tool, utility called VSCE, VS Code extension, I guess the full form. Okay, you have to use this. So it's if you are familiar with the Heroku deployment, it's something similar to that. Like what you initially have to do is, where is it? Yeah, as I said before, you have to create an account. Once you create an account, you will have something like this along with the Azure DevOps account. And here in Azure DevOps, what you have to do is you have to create a personal access token. Okay. Just go to the Azure DevOps account, which is created for you. I will revoke my existing one. I will create a new one. Let me give it webinar token. Make sure that you choose all accessible organizations, and that is one specific permission that you have to give, which is if you go to marketplace, there is publish and manage. You have to give this, but for the sake of simplicity, I will just give the full access, but don't do that when they are doing real things. So copy the token to the clipboard. I have copied it. Okay, so as I said before, you have to have this VS Code extension command line utility already globally installed, or even npx, it's fine. One thing is, once you create it, you will receive an email as well related to that, what we call the access token. Okay, so VS Code extension, you have to first log in with your publisher account, which is Charles Asentic. So once you log in, it will ask me whether I should overwrite the PAT, personal access token. Yes, I would say yes, and I will paste the token. Right, as you can see here, that token is added, and also even it's fine. I mean, the next thing is very simple. You have to just okay, VS Code extension. Just typing publish will do the publish. But the thing is, you might have received some warnings or errors related to different things. Like first of all, you will actually have something called, you have to have this publisher. Otherwise, it will show you like you are missing this option and so on. Okay, just make sure that you have given your publisher ID here as well. Right. So let me go here and publish VCSC publish. I will just publish it. Yeah, it's actually running this pre-published script, which is nothing but compiling the TypeScript. It will, I mean, I don't have a repository, I mean, in packages, and I don't have the repository field, that's why it's asking. But I will just say, just continue with it, it's fine. Yes, we have successfully published the extension. Let me go here to the marketplace, and if I refresh, you could see it's still verifying. It will take 1 or 2 minutes. So let me search for something like Codeman. You could see it is not there yet because it's still verifying. It's not published yet. Let's wait for it. Once it's, I think it will take 1 minute or so. Okay. Meantime, it's getting published. Like, I think we have already covered most of the things. So yeah, till it's getting published, I will just like to share a few. Where is it? Yeah, I would like to share a few references that you can use. Okay, so these are all the things deals with Microsoft. Like it's kind of really, I mean, we don't usually find enough resources for VS Code extension development. So most of the resources will be with Microsoft. And one of the best resources I would say to begin is like their repository called VS Code extension sample. So if I want to quickly show you, as you can see here, this is actually the repository. You can find tons of sample extensions. For example, if you want to work with tree view, maybe tree view, okay, that is tree view sample. If you click on that, you can actually see like a sample application. As you can see here, they have loaded the node dependencies. Likewise, it's a clear, I mean, step by step they will walk you through. I mean, though the instruction is not step by step, but you can go through the code and understand. So for any type of extension, you can actually refer this repository. This is the best source to learn. You can learn it. Okay, so that is one thing. And also you can just find this PPT and you can actually go through this. Okay, it's taking a little more than 2 minutes. Yeah, yep. So, right. Okay, success. As you can see here, it has a blue green tick. So now if you search for this, there you go. The extension is created, and also once it's published, you will actually receive a email as well. Okay, and if you click on this, yeah, Charles Authentic, next generation API client. No, it's not. But anyway, we'll get what we needed, right? So, yep. So that's it. And also, if you want, you can simply do a unpublish. One final thing to say. It will ask you whether you want to continue. Yes, I would like to delete it. Yeah, delete is successful. And as you can see here, if you refresh now, you no longer will see that. So it's very easy to publish and unpublish your extension. Right. So that's it for the webinar. So let's dive into some questions if we have got any.